Let me give you a little bit of my family history before I get started. My ancestors were part of the French Huguenots, who, due to religious persecution, fled France and settled in the Cape between 1688 and 1691. A total of 178 families on 4 ships. In 1913, my great-grandfather trekked from De Aar in the Northern Cape over 1,000 miles by ox wagon to a little place called West Nicholson in southern Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe. And that's where my life started. From humble beginnings as a 4th-generation Zimbabwean in a cattle ranching background. I tragically lost my charismatic father at the tender age of 12 and saint of a mother to breast cancer in 1993. While the death of a parent is an unforgettable experience, it somehow strengthened me and encouraged me to form a family of my own. And just when life seemed perfect, with a beautiful, loving wife and 2 adorable children, my kingdom around me was shredded when my wife and I divorced in 1996. After experiencing what I thought were the worst of life's tragedies already, nothing could have prepared me for the exponential challenges and tough times that lay ahead. I want to start off today by not only sharing my story with you, but I also want to illustrate how I've learned what a spiritual and positive mental attitude, the power of forgiveness, and what the importance and value in gratitude really mean. Despite being wrongly convicted, I spent 8 years in the most harrowing conditions imaginable, including 4.5 years in the notorious Chikurubi maximum security prison. Then for my last 2 years, they sent me to a Bellborough open prison on a farm. I want you to know 2 things before we get started. The first is that I'm innocent, and I want to reiterate that. I was ripped from my life and loved ones for years and spent a decade in prison. The second thing I want you to know is that I'm not free because I'm no longer incarcerated. My freedom means a lot more than that. It is a deeper freedom. And it is my road to this freedom that I want to share with you today. Let me highlight the contrast of my life before I got sent to prison. I was living the good life. I worked hard, I played hard, and was an avid sportsman, playing several rugby tests for Zimbabwe too. I lived what you might call a very successful life, with numerous thriving businesses. I was so busy being successful, though, that after 14 years, my marriage fell apart. And I no longer lived under the same roof as my beloved children. I missed them terribly. But through making the right business decisions, by the year 2000, life couldn't have been better for this farm boy who grew up dirt poor. I was extremely happy, making plenty of money in my safari business. I was flying my own aircraft, had a fishing resort on the shores of beautiful Lake Kariba in Zimbabwe, flashy cars, houseboats, speedboats, you name it. To top it off, I was engaged to a beautiful woman. Then in an instant, my world was turned upside down. It all started one weekend in December 2000 when I went on a fishing trip with friends to my fishing resort on Lake Kariba. Late one afternoon, one of my mates and I decided to go tiger fishing on the lake, leaving the other guys bream fishing in the river. And on our way back, we spotted 2 fish poachers in a steel boat, who immediately upon seeing us started paddling hastily for the shore in an effort to get away from us. Knowing they were notorious poachers, I drove my boat towards them to scare them off, and the wake of my boat tilted their boat, causing them to jump out into the water, which was about 1.5 meters deep. They were about 3 meters from the shore and soon scrambled to dry land. My friend and I then watched as they ran away into the bush and thought nothing more of it. The following day, the police arrived with one of the poachers and accused us of drowning the other one. To cut a long story short, I was framed by the poacher, the police, and the courts in an ugly, politically influenced conspiracy and sentenced to 15 years in Zimbabwe's prisons, of which 5 were removed as remission. Unbelievably, the accused only got a $10 fine and was set free because he was not driving the boat. And that's exactly as it came out in the judgment. On the 3rd of April 2003, during the height of the political lawless land invasion chaos in Zimbabwe, against police evidence, without a body and not presumptions, I was convicted of drowning that poacher. The shock was inexpressible. I was innocent. I was a successful, self-made businessman with a high standing in the community. Utterly humiliated, my life changed forever. The sound of that judge's gavel striking the solid bench, and the echo of my beloved fiance's grief are so clear that it seems like it was yesterday. And I can still see the image of shock and devastation on the faces of my loved ones and close friends up in the courthouse gallery. Then they all surrounded me in the wooden dock for my last few minutes of freedom. And I drew strength from their love and support. But inside, my world was crumbling. I was devastated. I'd been convicted of a crime that never happened. And to make matters worse, the person I was convicted of drowning is now living safe and sound in Zambia, which is a well-known fact in that area. The humiliation I felt then was but a droplet of the downpour that lay ahead. I never thought this could happen to me. Not only because I was innocent, but because I was making valuable contributions to society as well, with regular donations to charities, old age homes, and orphanages. And my carefully crafted reputation meant the world to me, and rested squarely on the value of my word, which now all meant nothing. And I've always accepted the consequences of my actions. I was no angel by any means. But this was not fair. And there were many ramifications from my conviction too. I could not have prepared for this. No one can. My 54 employees were suddenly left without any guidance or direction. And my family and loved ones were in total shock. There's no insurance you can take out on your businesses to protect you against incarceration. So if you like living on the edge, remember that. Protecting my businesses and the vision I'd worked so hard for was impossible. My 10 years of hell began, still in my expensive suit, cuffed and shackled, awkwardly shuffling down carved sandstone stairs of the courthouse to a grey prison truck waiting, as you can see in my sketch on the left. Probably the darkest day of my life. On the right shows the guards who laughed and snickered as I attempted to climb the high steel steps into the back of the truck, falling numerous times with cuffs and leg irons restricting me, and no one offered to help. The utter humiliation of being seen in shackles on Main Street during rush hour was indescribable. Arriving at my first maximum security prison, still in handcuffs and leg irons like a dangerous animal, they had me stripped naked. Stark naked, I was escorted through huge wooden doors into the maximum security exercise yard. Thousands of curious prisoners followed me, wondering what this white man was doing there, since I was the only one. Take what you fear most, then multiply it by 10, and maybe, just maybe, you'll understand the paralyzing fear I felt as I walked through that courtyard naked. I know now that even when horror lies ahead, we have to face it. It is the only way to overcome it. Walking through those doors, full dread, somehow I kept going. I had no other option. It was like entering another world. My senses were blasted by this foul smell of leaking sewage pipes that ran down the triple-story wide walls of the prison in the center of the yard, and the deafening noise of 1,000 loud prisoners continuously shouting. It's a rumbling thunder that never goes away. That is Chikurubi Maximum Security Prison. The red circle indicates my hall for 4.5 years in the prime of my life. The man be crouched down, still naked and terrified in front of the curious. And a bombardment of senseless questions by the guards followed. About family, business, my crime, where I came from, everything. Finally, they issued me a standard white and a pair of drawstring white shorts. For the first 8 years, only one set of clothing was allowed at any one time. Underwear was forbidden. After 6 months, you got a change of clothing. Sometimes. Other times after 9 months, leaving us walking around in tatters. And they'd take the old clothes away because guys were so desperate for cigarettes that they'd sell their new clothes and keep the old ones. I shared a cell 13 meters long by 3 meters wide with 78 other inmates. Each person had 33 centimeters, 13 inches, marked out on the walls in chalk. That was your space. Someone's head is there, and the back of his head is there. The toilet, stainless steel bowl, sunk into an open 1 meter square cement block in one corner, as you can see in my sketch there. As cushioning, we were packed like sardines on our sides, with legs all crossing over in the middle. We all faced the same direction. When you turned over, it was all together. Guys had to use the toilet at night, couldn't help but trample you on the way to the toilet. As cushioning against the cold concrete floor, you'd fold 2 of your paper-thin, worn-out, lice-ridden blankets several times to fit your space, then covered yourself with a third one. Your clothes were wrapped around your toothbrush and toothpaste, or the head gets stolen, and that was your pillow. From sleeping on those freezing hard floors, my hips had bruised black rings for years, and shoulders still give trouble today. You know, the skin on the bottom of your feet had 2 rings like that, and they turned black took years and years to go away. Can you imagine the discomfort? Those floors are cold and hard, and not even the breath you take is your own. No space, and packed so close together that what someone else exhales, you inhale. Can anything be further removed from freedom than that? And yet physical freedom is one thing. You can deal with it. We all can. By living in the moment to survive. But freedom of the mind and soul, that is something else. That is true freedom. Have you ever tried sleeping on a concrete floor for just 1 hour? Try it. Your hip bones burn from the pressure and shoulders ache within minutes. Imagine all those years on a cold concrete floor. I slept beside serial killers, hardcore armed robbers, ruthless rapists, and innocent good men. During those lonely long years, I'd watch the pigeons day after day. After they'd eaten the pieces of pup off the exercise yard floor, they'd fly over those high razor wire topped walls. And I wished 1,000,000 times that I could somehow just fly away with them and be free again. And I don't believe there's a prisoner that doesn't think that, because it is the only glimpse of freedom to see in there. It's just cold walls, bars, and razor wire. No furniture whatsoever. No beds, no tables, no chairs, no cupboards, nothing. Not even a mirror. I didn't see my face for the first 8 years. It's just rows of full defaulted blankets and hundreds of well-used water bottles on bare concrete floors. For the first 8 years, the worst thing to deal with were the lice. Thousands of them that never went away, ever. They would crawl and bite day and night, leaving itchy, weeping blisters. And because they never stopped, they were draining, both mentally and physically. And there's nothing you can do about it. But I tried. We all did. We spent hours killing them, as you can see in my sketch. And I'd like to believe it made a difference, but that might just be my optimistic nature. Sometimes we fight losing battles, but we fight them nonetheless, because that is all we can do. But you've all been bitten by mosquitoes. So you know what that feels like. Imagine mosquitoes in your clothes, in your blankets, in your hair, everywhere, that crawl and bite day and night, year after draining year. It eats away at you on every level. And of all the hardships in my 10 years in prison, that was the worst. I can sleep on the floor, wash my clothes in toilets, I can do all that. But the lice was something else. We had no basins or taps in the cells, and only one set of clothing was allowed at any one time. So we had to wash our clothes in the cell toilets at night wearing a blanket, and hang them on the walls with smuggled book staples to dry by the next morning. 3 or 4 of us would get together and take turns to wash our clothes, because one garment had to be used to block the toilet to allow the toilet bowl to fill up when attempting to flush. The water only ever dribbled in slowly. Then we'd wash the clothes on the cement block surrounding the toilet bowl, dipping them in and out as we washed, as you can see in my sketch there. At about 5 a.m., we'd take the slightly damp clothes, place them on a cleanly swept concrete floor, and rub the creases out with a prison-made sponge. Then fold them neatly, place them in a pile, put a hand towel over the pile, and stamp on it hard with bare feet, leaving them perfectly ironed. Another hour hanging on the walls, they'd be ready to wear. And wearing the clothes you're wearing now for 6 months without a change. Then to retain your dignity, having to wash them in a well-used toilet. even if it was your sparkling clean toilet at home, than having to wear them the very next day. I often thought how far removed that situation was from my life before prison. My beautiful clean home and washed and ironed clothing every day. The humiliation was beyond comprehension. When you're that low and you have nothing left to lose, you can still find even the smallest things that become meaningful. Let me give you an example. Thinking they were safe, the pigeons in Chickaruby Max would lay their eggs high up in the gutters of the halls. And during the Zimbabwe dollar crash, when there was no food and even the guards were starving, they would regularly catch innocent brooding pigeons off their nests. One evening, one of the guards approached our cell with a struggling pigeon in his hands. And while he was chatting to the other inmates, I took 10 cigarettes from my stash of smokes, which is money in prison. Never been a smoker. Stood up, walked over to the wire mesh between us, and asked him what he was going to do with that pigeon. In the silence of the cell, he proudly said, "I'm going to eat it." And everyone burst out laughing, knowing that the thought of killing an innocent bird upset me a lot because I'd mentioned it many times. But knowing that he was a heavy smoker, it could be easily coerced with cigarettes, which we got from our visitors fortnightly, I asked him if I could buy the pigeon from him for 10 cigarettes. So he looked at the pigeon, he looked at me, and he said, "Show me the smokes." After showing him the smokes, he immediately agreed. I then said to him, "Go to the window and let the pigeon go." In astonishment, he looked at the window and he looked at me and he said, "How do I know you'll give me the cigarettes after it flies away?" I said, "I will. I'll stand here. All these guys are and after you release the pigeon, I'll give you your 10 cigarettes. So he hesitantly walked over to the window and released the pigeon into the darkness. It was a magnificent moment as they all watched the pigeon fly away to freedom once more. Then he actually returned and I gave me 10 cigarettes. But it gave me a great sense of fulfillment, knowing that I was able in some small way, under those terrible conditions, to make a difference in this beautiful world. In 2005, during the Zimbabwe dollar crash, Harare city ran out of water. For 3 years, while in Chickaruby maximum security prison, each prisoner was allocated only 1 plastic cup of water a day. 1 cup of dirty orange city runoff water from a nearby dam, carried by farm prisoners. That was to drink, clean your teeth, wash your face, bath, everything, for 3 years. That's when guys really started dying. Most only bought, that's us sitting in formation waiting for 1 cup a day. And guys only bathed when it rained within our 4 hours out of cells. And that was after 9 months once. Then all 400 of us in our hall would make a mad dash into the exercise yard and excitedly have a thorough scrub. And it was like Christmas, trying to catch the best runoff water from the broken gutters. As you can see, I was showering there. We'd get unbelievably thirsty, locked in cells for 20 hours a day. And sometime during lunchtime lockup, between 11 and 2, it would be raining. And the guards refused us to go out into the exercise yard for a drink in the rain. The cruelty was unbelievable. For 17 hours, during nighttime lockup, between 3 in the afternoon and 8 in the morning, we were only allowed to use cell toilets if it was an emergency, for hygiene purposes. So after 8 a.m. unlock each day, the 400 of us in our hall, the Chickaruby is a hexagon shape. The 5 sides are halls of 400 in each, that's 2,000 guys. And then the 6th side was half admin, half remand, 200 remand guys, so 2,200 guys. You know, the 400 of us in our hall, after 8 a.m. unlock, would make a mad dash to reach one of the 8 hall toilets first. There were 4 toilets on the first floor, 4 on the second floor, and there were 400 guys. almost instantaneously, busting queues would form, as you can see in my sketch there. And that's exactly as the toilets were. So there was silver stainless steel bowls sunk into concrete blocks, separated by walls with no doors, just like that. And you'd wait your turn in line, then climb up on the cement block to do your business, and there'd be 80 pairs of eyes glued on you waiting to finish. Talk about stage fright. My white bum stood out like a sore thumb. Dignity was non-existent. I've learned the important things in life cannot be bought. Health, loved ones, and friends. In that order. During my first 6 years in prison, I watched over 2,200 guys die, primarily from malnutrition. It was during the Zimbabwe dollar crash when there was no food outside of prison, never mind in there. After being moved to a medium security prison, during the cholera outbreak of 2008 and 9, in 8 months, out of 1,200 of us prisoners at Harare Central Prison, 432 died. That's more than 1/3 of us in 8 months. It got so bad in there that we became totally desensitized. The guys dying all around us. And I just say during this coronavirus crisis that often we get so caught up in circumstances that we see only problems. In prison, we had nothing but difficulties. And if you give yourself over to them, they will literally kill you. Kill your spirit, your soul, drain your strength, and lead to sickness. Scientists say that negative emotions lead to the excessive excretion of cortisol, the stress hormone in your brain. Cortisol is good, but too much of it can lead to chronic disease. I watched hundreds of guys die from stress in prison. They hadn't contracted a disease, yet they died from the worry of possibly perishing like so many others. During these trying coronavirus times, we need to look for the light at the end of the tunnel. This period will come to pass, just like the cholera outbreak did in prison. We were 1,200 guys locked in a prison. Nowhere to go, no social distancing, packed like sardines at night, no face masks, no hand sanitizer, and 432 guys died. But through it all, I kept my faith, remained positive, extra vigilant, and cautious. We are a tough species and can overcome the harshest conditions if we believe we can. Phil Bezadenote, my closest friend Indy, and I, were playing cards on the tarred floor of the crowded exercise yard one day, and a guy sitting dead. No one around us moved. We couldn't believe it. And we couldn't go and sit anywhere. There was no room. So we just turned a little so we couldn't see him and carried on playing until prisoner hospital staff collected him. That's how terrible it was in there. There were people dying everywhere. And you could smell dead people continuously, day and night. However, that particular incident has always left me wondering why that guy died and I didn't. Why so many others lost their lives and I had the privilege of living. I'll never really know. But what I do know is that it taught me to be humble. One dying tomorrow and you don't, you learn to be humble and grateful for every little thing about your life. We have all in some way become desensitized to things in our community at one time or another. It is a surviving mechanism, but it also reduces compassion and humanity. It's a fine line to tread when pushed so deeply. But if you've lost the ability to empathize, then you have lost what it means to be human. In June 2006, the prison death rate was so high from malnutrition and disease that prison headquarters started allowing relatives to deliver food to their loved ones daily. My darling sisters, Bev and Lynn, fed me for 3 months, selling furniture and scraping money from wherever, until Lynn sold her clay pot business and gave up her career just to feed me for 4 more years. That takes a very special person. And I can honestly say that without her, I probably wouldn't be standing up here today. Can you imagine your sister? She had 2 kids and a partner, selling her business, giving up her career, just to feed her booty for 4 years. Unfortunately, very few relatives could financially afford to feed their loved ones daily, and the hunger continued for most. But friends, family, love and support sustained me as much as the warm home-cooked food they brought. After Red Cross had taken over feeding and normality returned in there in March 2009, we began a soccer league. And I was delighted to make the prison squad as a goalie, giving me the privilege to walk under strict escort to play against the opposite side on a field in their. During our jovial march there, singing all the way with fellow players, I asked one of the guards if I could touch my first tree in 6.5 years. When granted permission, I joyously broke formation. Now clearly remember the roughness of the bark, reminding me of my granddad's forearms, and the distinct smell of that jacaranda tree, which I knew so well. You have no idea how beautiful and uplifting it felt just to touch a tree and feel green grass again. My first evening at Connemara Open Prison, which was a farm prison, I was transferred after 8 years. So the prison service carefully selected about 100 prisoners to run a farm for the prison service. It's about 5,000 acres, and there's cattle and dairy, chickens, pigs, and a lot of plowing. And I was in my element. I was the tractor driver and fixed all the boreholes, and it was an absolute blessing. My first evening there, I spent sitting around an open fire on old logs and bleached cattle skulls, chatting with all Ndebele inmates, taking me back to what I loved so dearly as a child. Now, I remember getting lost in their interesting stories and the beauty of the sunset, the dancing flames, the tranquil cool of an nightjar, and the bright stars and the moon, which I hadn't seen for 8 lonely long years. Now, I appreciate the everyday little things in life, like a soft bed, a hot bath, a tasty meal, or a spontaneous cuddle from a loved one. Because those are the things you miss most when you have it all taken away. There are things we know that rejuvenate us. For me, it has always been nature. I am, and will forever be, a farm boy from Zimbabwe. Nature's in my blood. Touching a tree, smelling the earth, the feeling of soil in my hands. These things bring me restoration. For you, it might be hanging out with friends, dancing, reading a good book, or swimming in the ocean. Whatever is good for you, do more of it. Despite the hell I'd gone through, physically and mentally, the worst part was knowing that my beloved children were growing up without me. I told you in the beginning that not living under the same roof as them when my wife and I separated was the hardest thing. Imagine the heartbreak I felt when I went to prison. We have always been extremely close. It is a bond I will cherish and protect to my dying day. My proud son, Dusty, only 8 at the time, was always full of ambition. And we joyous and dream of making millions and plan endless projects and adventures. He was following in my footsteps and loving every minute of it, ready to take on the world with his dad, and then I was ripped away. My precious 16-year-old Sandy and I had, and still have, an extraordinarily beautiful bond. Since a baby, she's always been my shadow. And especially she is to me, I'm to her. But at 16, I was her anchor. I was everything in her eyes. She confided in me without boundaries and clung to everything I said and did. I loved them beyond expression. They loved me. And the time they needed me most, I wasn't there. They went through first loves, crushes, dances, 21st birthdays, and entered the wide world. And I wasn't there to see it. But as a normal knowing that I'm their father and should have been there, but I couldn't be. And I don't want anyone here ever to have to feel that way. Make enough time for your loved ones. What I've shared with you so far is about 3-4% of my story. The rest you can find in my book, which will be for sale afterwards, at the front. But I want you to all go back 10 years in your life. So think about where you were in the middle of 2012. How much you've accomplished in the last 10 years. That's what a big chunk I had taken away. But even in the depth of such horrendous experiences, I knew I had ultimate control of how I chose to feel and respond. The healthiest, behind every severity, lies an opportunity. And that experience gave me the opportunity to get to know hidden attributes about myself, to consider some really important things in life. It taught me many lessons, and that's what I'd like to share with you now. How my spiritual, positive mental attitude got me through there. Romans 8, verse 35. Can anything ever separate us from Christ's love? Does it mean he no longer loves us if we have trouble or calamity, or persecuted, or hungry, or destitute, or in danger, or threatened with death? I certainly learned to live very close with the Lord since my experience. After being moved to a medium security prison in 2009, while delivering food, my sister asked me if I'd like an iPod. So I said to her, "What's an iPod?" She said, "It's a thing that plays music." So I said, "Well, how big is it?" And she indicated this small, flat little thing. So I said, "Well, how many songs does it play?" She said, "How about 1,000?" I said, "No. Where do you put all the CDs?" Anyway, that's how much technology advanced in just 6 years I'd been away. The following day, the iPod arrived under the salad, and about a week later, a cell phone was sneaked in too. One of those cheap Nokia cell phones with the rechargeable batteries. It was exciting, risky business that you couldn't dream of in a maximum security prison. This is medium security, and it's very different. And everything was going perfectly until an envious prisoner reported me. After an unexpected search, unbelievably through some quick maneuvering with on-site guards, nothing was discovered. But I was sent to solitary confinement anyway for 2 years. That was extremely lonely. But after experiencing my precious little link to the outside world, I had to get my phone back, and I did, which made a huge difference. I had 2 batteries, and I had amazing guards that used to charge them for me. My sister and my mates used to pay them outside. And everything was going perfectly until 18 months later, when one of the friendly guards approached my spile at 5 in the morning and whispered, "Russ, they're coming for your phone." And there's no way of getting a phone out of there. But someone had brought me a protein powder about a month before, and it had to go through the doctor and then security. It was a big story to bring it in. And when I got it, I opened it and broke that silver seal, tasted it. When I put the seal back and closed it, the next time I opened it, the seal had stuck. So I kept it to hide my phone in there. So that morning, opened it, broke the seal, took half the powder out, wrapped the phone in plastic, replaced the powder, put the seal, closed it. 6 o'clock, the guards arrive. What they do is they make you strip naked, legs open, like you're hiding something. Then you all walk out stark naked into the courtyard, and they do the search. I come back into my cell, and everything is upside down everywhere. But my protein powder, still in good shape. 5 minutes later, I'm summoned to the security office. Walk in there, and there are 4 guards standing, one seated behind a desk and an empty chair. I hadn't sat there for 7.5 years. He says, "Take a seat." So I knew now there was a story here. So I sat down, which felt good. He said, "Do you have a girlfriend called Karen?" So I said, "No." I said, "I had one before prison called Karen." He said, "Okay. When did you last talk to her?" I said, "Long ago, before prison." He said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yeah." He handed me a letter addressed to me from Karen. So when I was talking to her on the phone the other night, she sounded so positive. After some intense questioning, this thought just came to me, and I said, "No, Karen was having lunch in Bulawayo, and she met this lady, and they started chatting, and soon realized that they both had boyfriends in the same prison." So the lady said, "Well, let me call my boyfriend, who's a guard in there. He can call Russ, and you guys can have a chat." So I used the guard's phone. But after I couldn't tell them what the guard's name was, they didn't buy it. An hour later, I'm escorted up to the officer in charge's office. When you go up there, it's big trouble. Now, walk in there, and there's like 15 big brass officers standing in a half circle, officer in charge, chair in the middle. He says, "Take a seat." Him and I got on really well. So he says to me, "If you don't tell me what that guard's name is, your life in this prison is going to change." And I don't know his name. And then the questions started. How tall is he? How old? What rank? Where did you make the call? How long ago did you make the call? And I answered as best I could, and they were getting furious because they couldn't catch me at anything. And then the head of the soccer, he said, "Do you want to talk to the officer in charge on your own?" So I said, "Yes, please." So they all leave, close the door. I said, "Officer, we've both been through hell. We've watched hundreds of hours die. I've donated endless stuff to the prison service, soccer balls, volleyball net, soccer boots, and uniform for the squad." I said, "Can't you just let this one go?" I mean, the officers were up to all kinds of illegal things. And he says, "Russ, I don't care about you. That's God's name now." He was furious. So I said, "Officer, I don't know his name." He said, "Okay." He calls the officers, he says, "Put him on death row in the dark." So they escort me over to the condemned section. They used to hang oaks in those days. And cells were 3 meters by 1 meter, same as my solitary, but dark. There are 56 cells, but one of them has got all of them have only got vents, so completely blocked off, but the vent gives you light. And this one, the vent was covered by a staircase. So there was no light at all in there, and then the electric light didn't work. So people were put in there to break them. So they made me strip naked, gave me 3 disgusting blankets, a 5-liter container cut off at the top as a toilet, same as solitary, and 1 liter of water. They locked me in there for 23 hours and 45 minutes a day. So I was allowed out 5 minutes in the morning to clean my teeth, 5 minutes at 10 o'clock to have a shower, and 5 minutes at 3 o'clock to prepare for lockup. It was cold, lonely, and dark. I couldn't even see my hand, like being buried alive. And I remember just walking and holding the walls, turning around, hold the walls, do some press-ups, carry on walking, do some star jumps, just exercising the whole time to try and on day 6, I got on my knees and I prayed. And I'll never forget the feeling of warm water being poured over me and a total sense of calmness. So I sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, Within 30 minutes, I faintly heard my Afrikaans mate shouting from the soccer ground, "Hey, Ras, everything's okay, my mate, don't worry, everything's okay." So I jumped up, I said, "Hey, Phil, don't worry, Ras, everything's okay." So I said, "Okay." Lay down on the concrete, looking up at the door. Within 10 minutes, I unlocked my door. Bolts and noise got through. Chucked in my clothes. Said, "The officer in charge wants to see you." So I go out into the blinding sun. I mean, I'd been in this dark hole for all that time. The sun was very bright and covering my face. Across the courtyard, all the guys running up. "Yeah, okay, Russ." Yeah. And I went up the stairs to the officer in charge's office. And his exact words were, he said, "Hello, Russ." I said, "Hello, officer." He said, "Have you remembered the God's name yet?" I said, "No, officer." He said, "I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave it in God's hands. You can go back to your cell." And at the exact moment when I was praying, my sister was paying him $200 to get me out of there. And that was a huge turning point in my spiritual life. Now I'm happy to say I walk every day with Jesus now. Now, I had an interview on TBN. I want to put that story on. They put another story that's coming. Because it seemed like the unrighteous thing to get out of there. But said his wife was his sister. Even in the Bible, it says the same thing. I've learned not to let past thoughts hurt me. The past only exists in your head. It can only come to life if you let it. Can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? Jesus said that. I was forced to live in the moment in prison. And it's one of the biggest lessons I still practice today. And to be able to find positives in all the negatives going on around me brought hope, which is a huge part of getting through prison life. Hope is the anchor of your soul. It's what kept me grounded and sane there. Hope enabled me to see that there's light despite all the darkness. Let your hopes, not your troubles, shape your future. I never look for hope outside of yourself. To find it, you need to look within. We're all made in the image of God. And if we take the time to look inside ourselves, you'll find a peace that will bring you hope. And for me, in prison, you don't have all the rat race distractions to take your mind off things. Everything, like my fiance with another guy, it hurt, so I blocked that off. If I think about mates on a fishing trip we used to go every year, or to Vegas to the conventions we went, that envy hurt, you block that off. You counsel yourself on how to think through the physical impact your thoughts had on you. And once you can find that inner peace, for me now it's easy to say it, but because I walk with the Lord. But that peace is inside you. If you let go of all that other stuff on the outside, you'll find that. And that gave me hope in prison. If you told me in year 1 you're going home in year 3, I would have said never. I'm going home now. Like 6 weeks, 8 weeks I could live with. Anything beyond that was too painful. And to be able to find happiness, even in the smallest things that happened in prison, kept me healthy. Those who couldn't died. We'd laugh and joke and fool around and play practical jokes on one another because it made us feel good. We encouraged each other during our daily exercise routines and sport and supported one another on emotionally tough days. There were many good men in there that helped me continuously, keeping me strong, positive, and as happy as possible for prison. Many people ask me, how I managed to get through there mentally. So I've spoken to quite a few guys that have been to prison and how we dealt with did things in different ways. And for me, I never believed I was going to be that long. So hope was always my, those guys said, no, I knew I had 15 years or 10 years, and that's what kept them sane. For me, it wasn't. It was different. But I had this gorgeous fantasy girlfriend named Cherie. And we'd fly all over the world, private jet, and catch mullet in Mexico and help those in need financially. And fish amongst the elephants on the Zambezi. And I created this beautiful world I could go into to get away from it all and feel happy again. That was just my way of getting through there. But after I was released, I wanted to know scientifically how the mind copes with those situations. So I did some research on it with Dr. Caroline Leaf's work, who is a very good friend of my wife's and myself. And every time we think, feel, and see, our mind generates a signal that affects every cell in our bodies. Thinking is 98% of that signal. So what you think actually affects every cell in your body and brain physically. Research shows that between 75 and 95% of illnesses come from our thought life. We have about 30,000 thoughts a day. The thoughts play a massive role in diseases in our bodies. But by the same token, it can be just the opposite. When you're thinking correct thoughts, you generate very healthy signals that affect your blood chemistry and build more healthy cells. So it was my happy thought life, even though it had to be a fantasy, that kept me healthy and sane in there. The power of your thoughts. And if you put Jesus in there, everything's easy. Why you should forgive. James 1, verse 19 and 20. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to be angry. For a man's anger does not bring about the righteous life that God desires. And I think we've all got unforgiveness issues. It's one of the biggest things that we deal with today. Humiliation of being labeled a murderer and terrible conditions were extremely hard to deal with, as was the pain of my bitterness, anger, hatred, frustration, and revenge for what they'd done and were doing to me. I hated them bitterly, and initially would lie there for hours, wishing every terrible thing on each of them in turn, the poacher, the police, the judge, the ministry, and all who were involved in my conviction. Then one day, I was struck by the realization that they'd all forgotten about me long ago. Here I was, consumed by the unfairness of it all, and they, blissfully unaware of the evil I wished on them every day. In the end, I was only hurting myself. I was carrying all that in my head and beating myself up for nothing. The single biggest lesson I learned in prison was true forgiveness. And for me, it was bigger than anything I could have achieved on my own. True forgiveness was inspired by God Almighty. And so I was letting go. It was a huge weight of my shoulders. And I learned to live in the moment from then on. The past was too painful, and the future full of unkept promises. So I just dealt with each day as it was. I learned to have faith, because no amount of worrying was going to change what I was going through. If you have anger or resentment in any way, it will eventually destroy you. Because that is what those emotions do. They steal happiness and freedom. And many people ask me how I managed to forgive them for what they did to me. And I remember the exact moment, walking in that exercise yard, after about a year, and I was tired of all the anger, hatred, and bitterness. I mean, it was draining me daily. And I'm looking up, and I just said to myself, Lord, take care of them, and let me get through this road that's been put in front of me. Goes around, comes around, they'll get what they deserve. Their judgment day will come. And once I accepted that, my life in prison changed. And it was an instant thing. It wasn't like a gradual letting go. It was like I had a secret that I was keeping for years and years, so worried about someone's going to find out. And then one day I just thought, I'm going to tell the Oaks. And I let it out and it was gone. Like that relief, there's no more having to hide nothing. It was freedom. That's what it felt like. It was an instant decision that I'd made, that they will be taken care of. And I can't change that. And then you can look at it in two ways. You can forgive, forget, and move forward, or you can retain, remember, and regret. The choice is yours. And if you say, I'll forgive, but I'll never forget, then you still remember and will never move forward. You can't bounce back from anything unless you forgive those who you believe have done you wrong. And only when you forgive and let go of the past can you be fully free to move forward with your full potential. Why you should be grateful and the big picture. Matthew 16:26. And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world but lose your soul? Is anything worth more than your soul? We all want too much in our lives, concentrating on what we haven't got instead of being grateful for what we have. And for me, giving thanks to God every day goes a long way. For my health, beautiful wife, beautiful family, a soft bed, running water, and so on. When there's no food, no water, and people are dying all around you, you become grateful for the fact that you're still breathing. And another day is a blessing. When you lie in a cell with 78 other people, and your breath is not even your own, gratitude suddenly has a different meaning altogether. Accepting that what I went through cannot be changed, and being grateful for what it taught me has unlocked my vision for my future. The healthiest of all human emotions is gratitude. Remember that and practice it. Having an attitude of gratitude is one of the most impactful habits for a fulfilling and healthy life. I learned to see the big picture of life in prison. At the innocent age of 6, I was sent to a boarding school, 200 km away from home. And in those days, you're only allowed to see your folks once every 3-month term, and that was at half term. Even if your folks came to town, you weren't allowed to see them. It was supposed to upset the kid. Colonial rules in those days. Then I lost my dad when I was 12. We turned our lives upside down. And enjoyed the wild ways of the Rhodesian Bush War on cattle ranches throughout my teens. It was a wild era, make no mistake. Being crazy about rugby and water polo in a war environment created a wild, hardy character. Hardships were part of everyday life. And I'm telling you this because I believe that resilience is something that you're not born with. It's something that you learn from the times you get knocked down and bounce back. In my teens, my uncle and I left the ranch house at 6 a.m. one summer's day to go and dip cattle 20 kilometers away on a ranch called Bundu Hills. In the middle of nowhere and deserted from the war, like most of the ranches were back then, it was part of the Metopus mountain range, with huge solid granite mountains everywhere. And the ranches averaged 25,000 acres each, so there were huge chunks of land. 1K from the dip roll, a troop of baboons ran across the road in front of the vehicle. And there were thousands of them in those days, and they were considered vermin from the destruction they were causing. So I jumped out the vehicle, no shirt, no hat, no shoes, a rifle, just like we did when we were young, and took off after them, shouting to my uncle I'd see him at the dip crawl. About 3 hours later, I was completely lost and in a total spin. Mountains and more mountains with thick vegetation in between. About 6:30 that evening, 12 hours later, exhausted, very sunburnt, it was November, thirsty. I'd only managed to find a drying up muddy puddle natural pan with a dead giraffe in it, and I drank from that, which was disgusting. And starving, I hadn't eaten all day. I once again climbed about 100 mountains, looking for Mount Tyler, which I knew and to get to work out where I was. And there were just mountains and mountains and mountains. And I remember this feeling of hopelessness and fear. I mean, I was just a teenager, all alone in the middle of the war. There wasn't a settlement within a 20-kilometer radius, and it was getting dark. The last thing this hardcore wild rugby would ever considered back then was to pray. I was okay. I didn't need help. Only those that need help go to church and pray. But I got on my knees on the side of that mountain, 18 years old, and prayed to God for help. First time ever. Immediately, for the first time, I felt that feeling of like warm water being poured over me, and I had no idea what it was. I knew exactly what it was. And I remember the feeling of calmness, and I stood up, turned around, like being guided, and slowly walked down the side of that mountain. It was solid granite like that. Solid granite went into the soil, was long grass, and I carried on walking just like a zombie. I just carried on walking like that. And about 10 meters further were 2-car tire tracks. My uncle had shot a kulubull there during the war. And I followed those, and when the tracks faded, they cut the trees in to get the vehicle in there and carried on following through the mountains until I got to the farm road as it was getting dark, when everyone was spread out looking for me. And I never told anyone what happened on that mountain that day. I thought they'd laugh at me and think I was crazy or weak. That's how it was in those days. And but I never forgot that feeling on the mountain. You know, my sister and my mom were strong Christians. And I respected them for that, but I was too busy worrying about me and my empire and more, and money. But sitting in the courtroom before I was sentenced, I prayed hard, up through the window into the clouds, and nothing happened. My first year in prison, I prayed hundreds of times to go home. Nothing changed. I wondered where God was time and time again. That incident in the first year when I gave them, and I knew there was a spiritual element there, so I knew he was still there. But conditions after that became unbearable for the next few years. I mean, people dying everywhere. One at my feet one night, I was the only one trying to help him. And when someone dies in your cell, I know that feeling just never leaves you. And it happened to us over and over. I mean, there was no food, no water. Once they left me after 4 years, up to in prison, praying one moment and up to the most immoral. And I was promised I was going home for years, story after story, year after year. And I thought, I stopped praying altogether. It hadn't changed anything. After 7.5 years, I had that incredible incident on death row, which changed my life forever. I still didn't go home for 2.5 years, but I knew there was a bigger picture. I knew that there were bigger plans for me. When you go to prison as an innocent man, there are many questions to ask yourself. Why me? What did I ever do to deserve this? Is this real? Do these guys, do the pain I'm feeling? Am I going to wake up and this dream will all be over? Well, maybe I've been put here to be protected. I was dealing with high-powered, dodgy guys and business deals, and so I thought, well, maybe I've been here, put you up to be protected. And then I thought, you know, I always told my kids that everything happens for good reason. So I had to walk my talk and accept that. Before prison, I was a big fish in a little pool, going nowhere, like a hamster on a wheel going around. It was all about me. Money, more and more, my empire. And now, it's about helping others and making a difference in other people's lives. Now I'm a little fish in a whole wide world making a huge difference. And the satisfaction I get from helping others far outweighs the millions I was making before. And the lesson here is, no matter what hardships you're going through in life, just remember, you're being prepared for where you're going. God has a plan for you, just like He had for me. I wish I could express the happy, bubbly, exciting, beautiful feeling I felt. I walked out the prison gates to freedom after 10 years of hell. People don't appreciate freedom. They realize when we're not in prison, there are ways in which we imprison ourselves. So our business partnerships, badly selected careers, being obsessed with money and ambition in the corporate world, even unhappy marriages. And it's only when you have your freedom completely taken away, do you realize that you were actually in prison too. When I look back on it all, it makes me wish I could somehow get through to people how precious and priceless freedom is. If you look at your life as it is, how free are you within your circumstances? Freedom is not just not being in prison. Freedom is the ability to make a choice and act on it. Freedom is letting go of what you control. Freedom is forgiveness. Freedom is being free from negativity. Freedom brings health. If you can be free in all areas of your life, then you'll reach your full potential. People often ask me what they did to me. I spent $42,000 US in one year with private investigators trying to find the assumed deceased. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Every time some strange in the remote area where he's living, the word spread like wildfire, and he'd go into hiding. They'd taken 10 years of my life, companies went broke, and I was just giving them more and more. So I don't give them one more second of my thoughts anymore. That's all behind me. I still have my health, beautiful wife, a lovely home, and a fantastic future ahead of me. I don't entertain negativity at all today. I only hang around positive people, love, and happiness. The company you keep influences your thinking. Your thinking influences your actions. Your actions influence your character, and your character determines your destiny. I was a wild teenager, make no mistake. Fighting, poaching, anything that pushed the boundaries of the law was fun for us. We lived life to the full, thought we were bulletproof, no consequences at all. But had I known then what I know now, life would have been very different. You don't want to know what else I went through in prison. I had to fight for my life on many occasions, and it was by the grace of God that I came out alive. Thousands didn't. With all due respect, we need to be careful of what road we choose from now on in this world. Who we hang around with. Don't get mixed up with the wrong people and start pushing the boundaries of the law, especially when it comes to money during these trying times. Because you don't want to go where I've been. There's no mercy in prison. None. It's real and it's rough. In conclusion, I was fortunate. I'd made it big, was very successful, and possibly during that time, I became a bit arrogant. But that experience has made me realize that I'm just a normal human being. That you can't value your life based on your title, your success, or your material possessions. If you had everything taken away from you right now, who would be left? What would people see looking at you as a person? We need to look at our core values more deeply and see how we can change lives and maybe make a difference in this world. There were times in there when I just felt this was the end. I didn't have the mental strength left to overcome more of those never-ending challenges. But from the path of despair comes this realization that just as my mind had helped drag me through those depths that far, so could it pull me out of them. Each and every one of us, when you dig deep enough, can find this inner strength to get through life's toughest times and deepest holes, out of our cages, out of the dark. Every one of you here today is faced with challenges, day in and day out. Those that you look for, and those that sneak up on you from behind. But who you are, and the depth of your determination, is what's going to elevate you to become someone that people will look up to and forever remember. I asked myself many times why I had to go to prison. Why me? What did I do to deserve that? And about 3 years ago, I got this strong spiritual message that I was supposed to go to prison. And I must accept that I had to go through all that. That was extremely hard to make sense of. And I thought about it hard. And believe it or not, I thank God for my 10 years in prison now, because I'm a better person now than I would ever have been. I don't know how to explain this, but I know 100% that God has redeemed me, because I'm a better person now than I would ever have been had I not gone to prison. I'm stronger, I know God better, I understand people more, and I believe it's made me able to reach out to you to tell you that God is out there. He loves you, He has a plan for you, and don't you ever doubt that. Can anyone ever fully recover from a terrible setback in life? We're looking at someone that did. You're looking at living proof that you can recover from whatever life throws at you. God will answer your prayers, He'll set your feet back on the ground, and He'll offer you a beautiful life. Just put your faith in Jesus and walk with Him every day. Amen. Thank you.